What do you think most people get wrong about Gumball 3000?
I don't know. I think we benefited from a bit of what people get wrong and what they also know, in the sense that if we've got any awareness, then I think that's sort of good. I essentially just wanted to create something to bring them together, and that's really where Gumball came from.
Joining me today is legendary Maximillion Cooper, visionary founder behind Gumball 3000. What started as a wild idea to drive supercars across continents with crews of cultural icons has grown into a global lifestyle brand, a movement, and a multi-million-dollar enterprise blending fashion, music, motorsports, and philanthropy. From British racing roots to marrying style with speed, Max has built a brand that's as much about culture and community as it is about cars.
There's always a circa sort of 40 plus different nationalities. There's always over 50 billionaires. My strength was the ability to kind of sort of float between these worlds, really, and have a circle of friends in all these different fields. Some very successful people in those worlds. We had over 1 million people attend. It was all risk-taking from day one. And it still is now. For me, it became my sort of bachelor week on that one. So that had a very different meaning and finale to it. It's like if you climb a mountain with 20 strangers, you're probably going to know those people the rest of your life.
Welcome back to the Built on Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Max Hansen, the CEO of Y Scouts and a two-time proud gumballer. In fact, in 2015, I rolled with Team Quest and we walked away with the Spirit of the Gumball Award. So today's guest is extra special to me. We're going to unpack the evolution of the Gumball, the business behind the brand, and what's next for the man steering it all. Let's get into it. Maximillion, welcome to the Built on Purpose podcast.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you again after all these years. Spirit of Gumball winner.
Yes, that was 10 years ago. Doesn't seem like 10 years, but we've seen a lot of different things change in our life. But hey, let's start out. A lot of people, especially in the US, they don't know what Gumball is. So I'll just get it started with a softball. For the people that have maybe been hiding under a rock for the last 25 years, can you give your best explanation of what Gumball 3000 is?
Well, I think in your intro, you sort of mentioned the element of it began with a road trip that's built itself into a brand over the last 2.5 decades. That we have a backbone to our business, which is really kind of putting on a once-in-a-lifetime sort of road trip every year that kind of explores the world. It's a 7-day event, 100 cars driving 3,000 miles. With incredible parties every night, and that sort of bare bones of it has grown for us into the live event now is a kind of mobile festival, a week-long festival, where 2 or 3 of the nights, in fact, actually on this last rally, on day one alone, we had over 1 million people attend. So they're pretty big festivals. On the rally coming up in September this year, we're expecting circa 50,000 people to 500,000 people, at least sort of 4 of the 6 nights. So big scale, as big as any festivals out there that you can think of. And through that sort of backbone of this once a year sort of road trip, we now sell products in over 40,000 stores. We have everything from video games to toys to books to vodka to watches to all kinds of stuff, really. And essentially Gumball's represented a celebration of not just automotive culture, but it really combines other passions of mine, really, which are really pop culture, really. So music, fashion, kind of together. And that's really what the sort of Gumball 3000 brand represents.
Awesome. And talk about how the roots, you blended those 3 things. I don't think most people expect a skater turned fashion student into a global lifestyle brand like you did, but talk about your past and then talk about what the spark of the Gumball 3000 was.
Yeah, so Gumball started obviously in the spring of 1999, and it was really a result of, I guess, my life up to that point, which, let's say, my teenage years and early 20s take me around the world to do some interesting things, mostly through sort of BMXing first of all, and then skateboarding. So I was obviously always kind of into that action sports world and did pretty good. I got sponsored, but growing up in Middle England, it's not like you're on the world stage like the big pros from California sort of thing. But that was sort of the dream at the teenage years. And I guess what that did do for me when I look back on it is it introduced me to working with brands. I got sort of small sponsorship deals back then from the likes of Vans and Swatch watches and those sort of companies. And then as I went through my teens, I got very lucky at the age of 17, 18 that I got asked to model for different fashion brands. It was just when I'd moved to London, I'd started attending this sort of famous art school in London, and a lot of fashion brands used to come and sort of recruit almost, pick a bunch of people and that looked all right and ask us to be in their runway show for whatever it was. And I did pretty good at it. I ended up being in adverts for some big brands, like Giorgio Armani and Ralph Lauren, and sort of fashion magazines at the time. And it paid me quite well. And with that money, I spent it wisely in learning to race cars. That was the one thing as a teenager that I'd had a passion for, but never had the opportunity to race at all. I never did go-karting. I never did anything really on four wheels, just always, skateboarding, four wheels, but never anything with an engine until that point. And that was just me following my dream at that stage. And so probably from the age of 18, 19, for 5-6 years, I raced in different categories of motorsport. Started at the very bottom, something called Formula Ford in single-seaters, like tiny Formula One cars, and ended up racing during that period in sports car championships and in Porsche races and various things. And I still juggled the other worlds in my life. So I finished a fashion design degree. I was still skateboarding, so I had friends in those worlds. And then because when I sort of finished that first degree, I didn't want to join the real world at that point. I was earning some great money through modeling and I was racing cars. So I was kind of super busy. I decided to give myself a challenge. I did a law degree. So I did 2 back-to-back sort of degrees, which during that, it was only a 6-year period in total. But during that 6-year period, it allowed me to just continue doing the other things and learn a lot, both from having the world perspective, getting some amazing friends and people around the world in these different worlds that I was still sort of very much involved with, racing cars and fashion predominantly. And so when I realized I wasn't going to be the next best Formula One champion, which probably took me 6 years to realize, and when mid-20s I was sort of not really intending to model much more, I was like, what's next, really? And I guess the realization was that my circle of friends by that point were some really interesting people. There were some wealthy people that were team owners in the motorsport teams I was driving for, or they were the sponsors, or I was very close friends with that whole sort of fashion world circuit. Lots of celebrities in that world that I'd got to know in that time, a lot of musicians in that time. And I felt at that point, really, my strength was the ability to float between these worlds, really, and have a circle of friends in all these different fields. Some very successful people in those worlds. I essentially just wanted to create something that could bring them together. And that's really where Gumball came from. So there's a slight missing part to that equation that around that sort of 1997, 98 time, I did try to buy a Formula One team. Not with my own money, because I hadn't earned that much money at that point, but with the backing and support of a very wealthy guy that I was racing for at that time, who was in the hedge funds world. And essentially we got outbid by British American Tobacco. They ended up buying this team that we were trying to acquire. And so really during that period as well, sort of 97, 98, I was spending that time trying to buy this Formula One team, trying to get sponsors, trying to loop in all my celebrity friends and wealthy friends that I'd met and my cool friends. And so when that team purchase didn't happen, I'd got all this enthusiasm and energy from everyone and nowhere to take it. So this is where the first rally came from. It was essentially me inviting all of those people on a road trip around Europe, a sort of same format as we still are, sort of a weekend event, parties every night. And it was really my way at that point to just bring those different entities together in the same room for a week, knowing that some magic might happen. And also I can show everyone that I could actually organize something. I talked to them for a few months about running a Formula One team, and I wanted to show them I could do something. So that's how that first one came about, which kind of is the first stepping stone into what this has now become.
During that first one, did you have any idea it would ever become what it is today?
Well, I think that first one I sort of actually saw as a one-off event, but because I had sort of looped in famous friends and their publicists to promote them doing it, and obviously being involved in the fashion world, I knew a lot of fashion media and automotive media, so I'd kind of got them involved to promote this first one. And so after that first one took place, which, like I said, was April 1999, the world wasn't as fast-paced as we are now in social media. You had to wait about 3 months for magazine articles to come out. So by September of that year, we ended up getting covers of GQ and Esquire and FHM and everything that was the biggest media that you could get at the time. You know, this event that I'd done. And things sort of happened to kind of make me kind of take the steps for the, organize the next stages of building a brand. One thing was I was always fascinated with brand, especially coming from skateboarding, skate culture, especially studying fashion design and then modeling. I was always fascinated with it in terms of how all of us sort of identify and associate with certain brands over others. Whether that is anti-fashion because you really think you don't care, but even that is you care. Whether you're somebody who would like to wear a plain white t-shirt from Hanes that's $5, or whether you'd buy a $500 t-shirt from Gucci for the same t-shirt essentially. I was always fascinated by that, and obviously being involved in that world as a model, and it's all about advertising and creating a lifestyle essentially that people want to kind of part of. So I loved that, and therefore I'd always kind of, these early stages of Gumball for me was always about kind of creating this lifestyle that really combined, like I said at the start, cars and music and fashion and street culture, the things that I understood and enjoyed. So it's always in my head. And then after that first one, I guess two things happened in the sense of, one is I came out of that one owing quite a lot of money. So I needed a way to earn some money quickly. And secondly, the passion and enthusiasm and support from everyone that took part in it, asking me to organize another one, was already like steps to the second one straight away almost, because the energy was there for it. Everyone loved it. And then, like I said, by the time the magazine coverage started coming out on it, then general public started to hear about it, and the brands that I'd started talking to already were seeing it in the press and then saying, hey, we sponsor that. It kind of turned a bit of organic legs into kind of second year, and really kind of moved forward. I think the third year for me was quite game changing. The second year and third year were really game changing years. I signed a deal with Sony PlayStation after the second rally for them to make it into a video game, which came out sort of about 3 or 4 years later and was in the top 10 in the charts in Europe for a good 2 years almost, and did very well in some countries, which really kind of came out. We're like, wow, this is incredible. A PlayStation game out now that is playing the real world rally. I signed a couple other deals around that time, one with Hot Wheels toy cars, which we still have today. Another license deal back then with toys that made a game called Top Trumps, which is like a playing cards game. And we still have that one today as well. And then the third rally we did, it became the sort of the Gumball Jackass special, when those old enough to remember Jackass, and Jackass was a phenomenon in the early 2000s on MTV around the world, of a bunch of kind of skaters doing some pranks together, sort of. They'd mates of mine, and I invited them on the rally, and they came on the rally in 2001 around Europe and made an hour-long special for MTV, and that was just huge. It was sort of next level awareness. It had taken us out of being at that point just known amongst a kind of small automotive fan base and maybe those that read some fashion magazines and seen bits, into being that MTV mainstream, which it was back then. Couldn't ask for a bigger kind of showcased on. And so that really opened up the doors for the next decade for us, really. Got it.
Kind of back, one thing that sticks out to me about your background is getting the law degree, being well educated. Like, I know a lot of entrepreneurs, as I'm sure you do too. And I see a lot of kids these days, they kind of skip through the education piece and just get right into business. How influential do you think your education and getting the law degree and like those things was in the success of just your life in general?
Yeah, I think when I obviously reaching last year's 25th anniversary for Gumball, it was kind of a milestone that allowed me a little bit to kind of run a few things and how that journey's been, especially kind of interviews about the 25 years. I think it's had an important place in the evolution of what I've built. And I totally agree, on socials, just see instant success and want to go straight to that. But of course, you're going to have some people achieving that. But I think every part of my journey, the education particularly, was just really important. Look back on certain things, I do question like, why didn't I do something sooner? Or why didn't I do that next step of evolving the brand at an earlier stage? But everything evolved because of knowledge and things at the right time, the right moment. And I think things like particularly having a law degree, well, both of them. I have a fashion degree and a law degree. They've sort of worked really well together with everything that I've done, really. But law essentially gave me discipline and structure that I think my creative side, which is majority of me, didn't have. I always think, say to my kids and even to staff when they're interviewing people, I think still respect anyone that's got a degree. It doesn't matter what it's in, to a certain extent, because of having that discipline to actually kind of self for 3 or 4 years to a subject, to a university, and through that, because especially right now, that sort of everything, as we said, is fast paced, and feel very few people are structured or have much attention these days. Everything's too quick. So
yeah,
at least having the discipline to kind of a degree in pretty much any subject gets you a few steps up the ladder.
Yeah, 100%. What would you say most people get wrong about Gumball 3000? Like, I know there's certain people that, there's people that know, and especially in Europe, when we're there, especially for the Gumballs, people understand what it is and really understand more of the roots. But what do you think most people get wrong about Gumball 3000?
I don't know. I think we benefited from a bit of what people get wrong and what they also know, in the sense that if we've got any awareness, then I think that's sort of good. Now, if some people have heard of it because they're passionate about cars, or if they've heard about it having a bunch of super rich people on it, or if you've heard about it just through jackass type people and think it's a bunch of stupid people on it, whatever. I don't really mind. I think what I've enjoyed about it is the fact that it is very eclectic, and fan base can be anyone from a sort of year old kid playing with the Hot Wheels right through to any age, 70s that are into their cars and whatever. I think probably just if people have seen some clips of it or something, maybe I think the most misconceived element to it is probably that it's like an illegal road race, whereas the premise for it and the mindset was always about it just being a road trip. But again, you're going to kind of comparisons to like Cannonball Run movie, which is kind of out and out race coast. So particularly that kind of connotation in the US, because that sort of race from coast to coast, and obviously when we've driven New York to Los Angeles and vice versa, people are going to compare that kind of thing and really think it must be about racing. But I guess we've always, if people would dive into it a little bit more, then they'd always see that we've got vintage cars and concept cars and Rolls Royces next to supercars. So in 1960s American muscle car, and on the same rally there's a Koenigsegg, then it can't be much of a race, but just kind of like almost kind of a interesting mix of everything. Yeah,
for myself, I think one of the funnest things for me, you kind of hit on it, was, pulling into a gas station and having mobs of people and letting a kid get in the car and rev the car up and just seeing the smile it put on his face. Like, to me, that is absolutely amazing. Yeah. And the other thing is, in Europe, they just set up their lawn chairs at the side of the road just to watch this thing. And people don't get this. Even in pouring rain, I remember we're going into Oslo, it's pouring down rain. People are out everywhere, still sitting in the rain. An old couple on the back of their car, just sitting there all day watching. To me, it was absolutely amazing, and realizing how special it was, and just the people really, really appreciate in Europe, probably a little bit more in the United States.
Yeah, it's become a bit of a sort of cultural phenomenon in certain countries and regions around the world that, like you come out in their masses to kind of come and see it. Even I sort of question, is that bit of magic? Because, I attend other rallies, I attend, incredible events, that hundreds more supercars and hypercars than we do, that don't attract fans in the same sort of way. I think on that last rally you did, Stockholm and, all of Amsterdam were just, there's tens of thousands of people every single night wherever we go, and rain or shine. And, we had this, wherever the route's been, I think even like that was a day ago, and wherever we've been year on year since then, it's just increased and increased. And like I said, last year was probably as it should be, really. It should get better every year, but last year was definitely kind of the biggest thing we've ever had. It was ridiculous.
Wow. Man, I'm so glad to hear that. I saw a lot of pictures and I picked up on that too. And I think the standpoint of people understanding what it is, I know so we were in 2015 and 16.
Yeah.
And for me, it definitely is not a race, but there is something to be said of like being efficient and get a city maybe a little early, so you have a little bit of time to settle in and maybe get to the party early, or have maybe.
I think they're dictated by what car you choose to bring, right? Because when you're in your, whatever you're in, I think Porsche's 1 year, maybe both years, I can't remember.
Yeah. Yep.
Had you right, guys, we're going to bring like 60s American muscle, and the way you approach the event would be very different. This last rally, for example, the Gumball winner that won it was a guy called Chase, and Jimmy, NFL player, customized a Rolls Royce into a kind of madman, and broke down every day, got there every night, and it kind of added to experience, but it had Porsche, they would have been ahead of the game and not suffered any of that, So it really is how you tackle Gumball yourself.
Yeah. No, I thought about it. I definitely will be back for a year, but I thought about if I would have been in this year, I would have driven a 95 Porsche that I have. And you're right. It might have been a little different, although the 95 still gets up and goes, but it would have been a little different than being able to, cruise from city to city. The other thing about to me that people might not know is how strong the community is. Like I have from those 2 rallies that I did, I have lifelong friends that I still talk to that are like, it was weird. It was almost like a bond that was created where like when I go to a city they're in, like it's without question. I tell them before I text, people that I know through business just because there's this connection. And so I've maintained a lot of friendships. Talk about, how intentional was it, you think that is? And just talk more about it.
I think like the very first about because I had a pretty good, network of friends at the time. I'd say even on that first rally, friends that were, the likes of skate world to pop stars over in Europe, Jamiroquai and so on, and racing drivers, that just people that I had encountered over the sort of the day. So the sort of it was already there from the very first one. So springboard forward 25 years, and we've got over that alumni that are a genuine sort of who's who from around the world. And I think on every rally now, we sort of have there's 300 in one rally, and there's always a sort of 40 plus different nationalities, 50 billionaires, and these are that have done something, been successful and they're in. And probably organically, they make some pretty interesting characters, I don't think days where we have people that probably just inherited their sort of funds from old money. This is really a combination of, huge collective have built their businesses and maybe sold them. And, when we had all early .com founders on the rally of PayPal and those sort of, so I think we've become a sort of almost a bucket list event for people that have made a bit of money in whatever field they're in and attract that kind of character that is up for an life experience. And probably that's a real shared common bond between all participants that people are sort of, Gumball is it's not for the faint-hearted as well. It might sound for parties and whatever, but it's a long, grueling kind of week. And it's an emotional week, and it's exploring the world. It's driving through multiple, quite often going to countries that you probably wouldn't otherwise get the opportunity to go to. So I think you need some adventurous characters, and it's sort of become a melting pot for like those sort of minded people.
Yeah, I agree. When I think of Gumball, people only see the glamorous parts, but like if you're an actual it's an adventure. You're going to get lost. You're going to have some issue with your car. You're going to have to help other people with issues with their car. There's going to be logistical issues. There's going to be wrong turns. There's going to be ferries. There's going to be all these things. And to be honest, especially when you're partying every night, sometimes you're, probably not in the States. So it's a whole like adventure that most people understand unless actually do it. So if you're out,
I think because it is quite a sort of an adventurous week, like it is quite unless people think, it can't be that difficult. It's just driving from A to B every day. But it's genuinely kind of takes people out of their zone, let's say. So by the end of that week, you really have kind of probably bonded with a lot of other people on that trip because it's that shared experience. It's like if you climb with 20 strangers, you're probably going to know those people the rest of your life because you've achieved something new together. That's sort of I think Gumball has a similarity to that in many ways.
Yeah, there's one memory that's out of me with regard to you that I was really impressed with. We were in Reno. It was complicated. Logistical Gumball, obviously, they, kind of crated up blew them over, and getting the off took a lot longer. And I remember you being there the entire time waiting till every car got off. And to me, I was like, this guy is a badass. Like he could have just on your merry way and got to Reno, to the next city, and you were there the entire time. And to me, that meant a lot. You know what I mean? You're in at that time, if I'm doing my math right, it was, your 15th Gumball. He very easily just said, hey, you guys deal with this. And so there's something about that I kind of always look back. I was like, man, this guy is an absolute baller. He walks the talk and, stuck in there.
Yeah. I mean, sort of, whilst obviously it's built this sort of, business around it. The rally itself is very unique, and I like to be the host. I feel like everyone participating on it are my guests, really, and so I should be taking care of you. And I try to. And even if that is giving you a hard time sometimes, that's part of it. Push you through there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, another thing he doesn't usually live in the same sentence as street racing, and you've made philanthropy cool. Why was that important to you? How did you pull that off?
I think it kind of carries on from the just having about the network, the alumni sort of collective of wealthy and influential people that it's kind of assembled over the years. And I think by the sort of 10 years into it, sort of thought, you know what, we've got not only has Gumball got a voice amongst kind of youth culture and culture, but actually our network has got an even bigger voice than us, and we should do something with that. And also, I think in that first decade, I'd already at that, spent that decade being as exploring the world as I could, really, pushing the boundaries of what was possible, where to take the event. And that often meant taking it to cultures and countries that I was learning, driving through North Korea, driving through China, taking it to North Korea, taking it to North Africa, every corner of Europe, realizing how, these are all amazing cultures. And I love the fact that through what Gumball brings, it kind of unites people a little bit. One element of wanting to kind of use our platform together to a certain extent. And then, like I said, exploring some of these places and how everywhere could do with a helping hand, particularly in the areas that I'm familiar with, which is more that sort of sports and arts, from the skateboarding worlds to music and the creative worlds, kind of help communities that aren't able to those kind of pursuits. That's where kind of the foundation came. I think I started the foundation by, launching it with sort of auction on the kind of raised some funds and rapidly went into creating project partners and relationships with the likes of Tony Hawk, the Skate Park Project, his foundation. We've now partnered with them since 2013 and had a helping hand in build skate parks across North America and other parts of the world. And I think then going into those projects that we've done and seeing the kids skateboarding there, and it's just a really be able to kind of offer, particularly to communities that if we didn't support it in some shape or form. And we've done similar across other sports, across football, across basketball. We built a floating sports pitch in Cambodia last year that can be a football pitch, and be a volleyball court and so on for a school, a fishing community that didn't have anywhere to play sport. So I think it's been really, I got a great team here that run the foundation, and it's also allowed us to kind of just harness other relationships around the world that have been really fulfilling to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, being a participant, you've enjoyed these people so much. And then towards the end, at the last dinner, you have the auction. And as a participant, you're like, you just kind of want to give back to like everything that's given you. So it's super special. What about a lot of people that listen to this show, entrepreneurial, building businesses? Talk about maybe one of the biggest challenges that you ran into in Gumball over the years, like a risk or something that you're that this could blow up in my face. This could be a big anything that you could talk about that, the biggest challenges.
There have been so many over the years, but I think, from an overall business perspective, you didn't start the company money. And it kind of came about as a result of, as I said, in the sort of finished the fledgling kind of being a driver, and I didn't have any money in the bank from doing that. That was all sort of spent on just life. And so when I started this, that first rally was almost a dip my toe into kind of, is this my kind of creating this world essentially? And then I just go all in to make that work. I think there was no safety net, no money in the background somewhere, that if things went wrong, it could save us sort of thing. I think my first at least 5 years of the business, it was sort of hand to mouth on the money, when funds came in, whatever together from entrance or sponsorship or starting to sell product in some volume. It was all just paying the trail of money that is owed in just everyday business running. And at the same time, you're trying to kind of be progressive and invest in doing the thing. And, so I think that first could have, as a lot of companies don't last longer than that for a good reason. There's not sort of profits until a bit after that, unless you're maybe a bit luckier or a bit better business than I was. Those first 5 years were a real hustle and struggle. But I just had this really strong vision, and things were working, in the sense that people knew what I was doing, and it was creating something exciting and fresh. And the belief continued with me that it would come good eventually. But in terms of making calculated business decisions, I'm not really very good at that, in the sense that I will go all out to do something based on an idea, no matter what the cost. So, for example, when I say to you, which we touched on, the rally became a platform for sort of explore the world and do something new, do something no other events were doing, do something that no other car events have thought of. And that was flying cars mid-rally. So we could start the rally on one continent and finish it on another one, much like you did 2015, you started in start line in Stockholm one weekend and crossed the finish line in Las Vegas the next weekend, and people have a hard time getting around how do we do that, But by 2015, we'd done that 4 or 5 times. And, one year we started in London, finish line in Los Angeles, but we'd actually done 1,000 miles through Europe, owned all the cars from Belgrade to Thailand, driven through Thailand for 24 hours up to Bangkok, and then from Bangkok flew the cars again to Salt Lake City, and then driven to Vegas and Los Angeles. And again, that was all done in a week-long period. And, when I look back on it, that cost an incredible money that was not rational in terms of making money for a business. The maths just didn't work. What our entry fees for that event and what we were in a sponsorship for that event just didn't work. That was going to cost me more than all of that. I had a belief and a desire that by doing this, we would, we'd be at the pinnacle of what we no one else around us. We'd keep on evolving it. And at some point, we'd hope to appeal to bigger sponsors and bigger media and be a bigger attraction that would generate the funds. And fortunately, by having that sort of perseverance, it did eventually pay off. But, if you were to have an accountant sit on your shoulder, you'd never have done any of that. It was all risk-taking from day one. And it still is now, even taking the rally to countries and parts of the last year's rally, starting in Saigon and going through, Vietnam and Cambodia and that. We'd never done that. So it was a new challenge and a new risk. And with all things like that, there are risks to overcome. But I've obviously learned to deal with those, and I kind of somewhat enjoy that challenge, which probably keeps my excitement for it.
Yeah. Talk about what I was always, I people about Gumball 3000 from when I conversations with them, or all the people that have been on Gumball. And, you've worked with, from Snoop to Tony Hawk to talk to musicians. Who gets the Gumball? Who totally misses it?
To be favorable here, that most of that sort of celebrity that comes to us, or influencer, let's say, as they are now, they're really doing Gumball because they want to do it. So they've kind of approached it with the right spirit, in the sense of events that you see around the world where some celebrity has just been booked to attend it. They're not going to enjoy it. They're not going to kind of be passionate about it. Celebrities that are on Gumball, they're treated the same as everyone else. I mean, they might be slightly different in the sense that they can perform on a concert or a party, so they've got an added element to the likes of you and I that don't do that. But, Tony Hawk, fantastic, embrace every element of it. I rally about 7 times, and, Tony and his friends that are friends of mine as well, that come on it with his team, they embrace every element, treat it as like a skate tour. So in every city, they'll get out and skate and demo and go to all the skate spots, and I think that's one amazing way. And I think similarly, or even when we do have sort of certain celebrities come to us in more recent years, sometimes it's been slightly strategic. They've maybe had something to promote or treat the rally as a bit of a PR tour, which why not? It's a great week-long experience where you are and if you want to play at the parties every night or play at a couple of the music concerts en route, then what a great way to kind of keep your profile up and show who you are, especially maybe to some new cities or countries. So I don't know, Afrojack, Deadmau5, all of these are obviously a great friend of mine, a rapper from Houston, Texas, Bun B, has done the rally since about 2010 and, just embodies the spirit of Gumball every year. I don't think he's ever won Gumball, but he deserves to.
No, I love that. This is a fun time to share this with you. We were in Austin at Austin City Limits, which is like a festival, and we had Deadmau5 and his ex, on Gumball, and just, friendly with them, Kelly. I don't know what, backstage already, and we were like, oh, maybe we should grab him and say hi. So they go say, hey, Max from Gumball's here, and Deadmau5 comes running out because he thinks it's you. And he's like, oh, and he kind of was like a little disappointed, but then he was super gracious. They were like, all right, come on in. Let's hang out. We'd sit him and watch a board. But I was like, oh no, I forgot. You say Max from Gumball. They're going to think it's Maximillion Cooper for Gumball. So it was just,
at least he looked after you, it sounded like.
Yeah, we went out after. Normally he'd go out. We went and got a table after that and had a really great time. And then the other thing, by the way, happy anniversary. I know that was this past week, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Our lives run a little parallel in that I got engaged on my first Gumball in Stockholm, and it was like the most amazing place to get engaged. And then obviously ended up getting married shortly after that. It was my second marriage. I had a son from a previous marriage. My wife I have 3 stepkids. So there's a lot of parallels. So talk about marrying Eve. What's the real story? What's the misconception people have about life, or maybe not, or how has everything gone?
Yeah, well, very much so. You met Eve on Gumball. Was a participant in 2010 rally. I got divorced just the year before. So I thought I was going to be sort of young, free and single and have a bit of fun. First woman I sort of meet on that rally, I sort of fall in love, and we're here today, 15 years later, married for 11 years and got a little 3-year-old together. So it's been a little story like that. And yeah, I mean, Eve inherited my 4, as she calls them, bonus kids at my previous, who are all now 23, 21, 19 and 16 years old. Everyone gets on fantastically well, even on tours with her and all kinds of stuff. It's been amazing.
Yeah. No. And you have 3-year-old, right? Together.
3-year-old little boy, Wild. He's an amazing little boy. And the older brothers and sisters, give him too much love. And no, you can never give too much love. But, he's going to be very spoiled his whole life, I think, for sure. So he's too cute. And I'm loving being, that older dad, as you mentioned before we came on. Not too old, but, old enough that I got the experience that some of the dads in the school drop-off don't have.
No, that's exactly right. We almost have the same setup. I have a 6-year-old, and when I would go to maybe school, I look around and I think some parents may over and be like, I can't tell if I'm maybe the grandpa or the dad, which is totally cool. I'm totally fine with it.
Yeah.
So get into what have your favorite gumballs been? Just some of them have had their uniqueness, but give me maybe an example, one that might be your favorite and why, and then we can just talk about.
I think the groundbreaking 2008, started in San Francisco, crossed the finish line 7 days later in the Beijing Olympics, and just the sheer sort of audacity almost of being able to kind of put that on. Drove from San Fran to Los Angeles, Diego, to Vegas, big parties, concert in Vegas when we got there, and then flew everyone and flew cars and landed in Pyongyang in North Korea, and took everyone as soon as we landed by coaches to a stadium, Mayday Stadium, which is the world's largest sports stadium, and we all sat and watched this performance there called the Mass Games. About 150,000 people performing for about sort of 300 of us. And then the next thing, we did karaoke that night, and then the next day we went into China, and two days later carried on the rally, obviously, and crossed the finish in Beijing at the Olympics. And I think just that experience such cultural contrast in 1 week, flying from Vegas to just somewhat sort of surreal, and the fact that we sort of off and and the premise of that one, it just came about through chance meetings on take the rally to Asia, around that point to China and the Olympics and so on. I think what I'd realized very early on, that this sort of eccentric melting pot of successful people that are driving on the rally kind of open up doors around the world, and you realize how music and sport and cars, in particular, just sort of unite people. You can have a conversation with a person in any corner of the world. I mean, not so much probably not in the United States, but in other world. I'm a big fan of football, or as soccer as you may call it. And, wherever I go around the world, I can have a conversation with someone. And probably the same about just sort of a passion for kind of cars, and maybe to a certain extent Formula One these days is making a platform that there's fans in every country. And I love that. And obviously I've really been, since being with Eve, the music industry has played a bigger role in my life. And you just realize that artists can go to all corners of the world and perform and have fans and have relationships with people that, often in countries that don't even speak the same language, and religions and cultures are completely different, but that language of sort of, entertainment, music can unite us. And I think that it's not used enough to a better gain in the part of the world, because, obviously we have platforms like the Olympics and like the World Cup, but those I feel have been a little bit soured in recent years over, the finances of them and everything. Whereas actually, if you just get on the basis of teams from around the world to play a football tournament together, there's something quite beautiful about that. I think Gumball's been that amazing platform. So going back to that sort of, my highlights to wherever I've taken it, particularly that 2008 rally, use this platform to kind of explore and travel, to a certain extent be a little bit sort of groundbreaking, ones that have the highlights for me. So that one particularly. And then quick jump forward to 2014 to the one that was from Miami to Ibiza. I actually got married at the end of that rally, sort of 3 or 4 days after the rally finished. The rally for me became my sort of bachelor week on that one. So a very different meaning and finale to it. So that one's obviously always going to be special. And scale and production and taking the event to the next level. This last one, Saigon, Singapore, definitely kind of showed we can take things to a whole different production than anyone's seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but absolutely amazing. And then, what blows my mind to a certain extent too, in a humble way, is you built a brand that people want to tattoo on themselves. Like, that's pretty rare air. I mean, that's like Harley Davidson territory. But what did we've talked about the makings of it, but what does it actually take to build a brand, kind of tribal brand loyalty, and how do you protect it?
I mean, and I think that comes back probably just to a certain extent. We've sort of, whilst we got this in different countries and communities, we got some really kind of great exposure, and obviously over the years, different depending on which sort of been our sort of for a bigger audience to watch it, whether it's been on MTV and that for a decade, or in more recent years through, let's say, YouTube or different regional sort of TV networks. I think even though we've kept a slightly kind of underground feel about it, which kind of gives us a bit of kind of, and I think without that, we wouldn't really have kind of loyal fans. There's a little bit of a lawlessness to Gumball as well, people like. So it's balancing a bit of everything. And I think, you could sort of set down to write, how do you make it kind of cool, or make a brand kind of, go to the extent where people want to have their on themselves. I remember the very first of the times I sort of saw this way back in, it was the Jackass kind of military, can't remember where, which military it was, but maybe watching this will even remember whatever, but it was like a US like Marines kind of troop or whatever you'd call it.
Yeah.
Probably like guys sent me a photo and they'd all had the little tattooed here. And they'd obviously all seen it, just thought it was the kind of the maddest, craziest, coolest thing they'd seen, and gone out one night. I thought that was probably the first time I said, wow, that was guys really went and did that, And over the years, I think lots of Gumballers have had tattoos that are just to mark the experience in their life, that they're part of the community sort of thing. And a few other famous faces have had them as well, sort of famous personalities that have done the rally. So, I mean, amazing. Have you got one?
No, I do. Actually, I don't know if you could see it. Everybody on Team Quest ended up getting a tattoo. I have a King of Hearts right here, and the women have hearts. So there's 6 of us running around with those. Funny thing is there's actually other people that weren't part of our group that got those tattoo later as well. It's kind of a weird thing. I totally take it as a compliment.
Part of something that if it feels right to you, if you're that people, if it embodies, your mindset on things, then that's a great thing to be part of.
I mean, for us, it was just getting it to always remember what an was. You know what I mean? Each gumball is different. First one was absolutely amazing. I don't even know if you could put into words, unless you're experiencing it. As we start to wrap up here, I want to be respectful of your time. I know it's hot there, and you turned all your fans off for me, so you're sweating through this. I want to get into
heat wave in London. It's a rare thing. Capture it on film.
Yeah, capture it on film. Yeah, I talked to somebody the other day that it was hot last week too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been hot. I was talking to somebody else, kind of mentioned the same thing. They're like, yeah, we don't have air conditioners here. It just doesn't happen very often. To finish up, I kind of want to understand, if you don't mind sharing, principles you live your life by, the ways you manage your business. I mean, I think everybody sees this glamorous business, but I know everybody that has business knows behind all that, there is somebody that has some principles that they maintain. You now have obviously a big family, so balancing that and business, are there things that you do to help kind of balance that all and believe in that have kind of helped you kind of stay on the path that you've been on?
I'm really a bit cliched, but this whole sort of work hard and put a lot of structure into every element of our business is really important. I think my attention to detail on things I think always is probably laughed at inside the company, but with organization and just literally, our headquarters is kind of like a museum as well. And I think the principle for me to kind of just keep everything in order, and especially with anybody that is in this events business, you're dealing with moving pieces all the time. And if you haven't got bit of order and structure to your own approach to things, then you'd fall apart at the seams very quickly. I think from my own mindset to approach the way I tackle business too, I think it's really important for me that I have really good escapes from business as well, because really the business does consume me 24 hours a day of every day, as anyone that owns a company themselves pretty much. But I'm dealing with a lot of very, like I said, particularly on the event side of things, a lot of moving pieces, and it can be very stressful. And I'm trying to do things that people haven't done before. So, taking the event as we've referenced in this conversation to, whether it's Cambodia or North Korea, or it's things that there's no kind of it's going to go like, and who to. So I think just sort of keep a level head and, enjoy other passions, really, huge sort of passion for the world, for all sports, passionate about football. So I think those to me and football are sort of my escapes from things. And I really need that so that when I am here busy working, I am fully focused and working and taking on the world.
Yeah. Now that's curious about, after doing this for 25 years, I always fight off the kind of legacy brand trap. How do you keep things fresh and, right direction? Because you've been so creative. I mean, these, those of you that don't know a lot about them, but there's so many logistical things and just the venues. I mean, there's so much that goes into this, and you guys have basically done. So at this point, how do you keep it fresh?
Well, I think we continually do some great sort of collaborations, and we have some great sponsors. But I think, we're very strategic, and it's very curated entry grid every year. So we make sure that we do have influencers of every era taking it. And, and because of the world that we're in now, that isn't so ever needing to be a kind of a cold call outreach to sort of kind of get them on through the business and through doing it for over 2 decades. We run into a lot of people. We've got a lot of great relationships, got a lot of friendships, and we've got the network of those that are on it, right? So organically, a lot of really interesting people come to us to participate in it, but we sort of curate it so that, particularly let's say in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, streamers, YouTubers are things going, so on last year's rally, we had a guy called iShowSpeed who they're in like one of the most streamed people in the world right now. And, we will collaborate with some really cool brands and a lot of streetwear brands from brands like Undefeated and Patter and Supreme and those sort of companies, but right through to luxury brands. I think it's keeping ourselves sort of out there and working with other companies that are kind of also in that sort of, they're hot. They are the kind of the influencers of the moment as we're kind of a system. And the same, with the sort of participants curated to try and have cross-section of sports stars, J's and actors and whatever. That keeps you relevant.
Yeah. And you guys continue to do like I said, I hope to make another rally. I think it might be like when my son graduates from college, maybe I take him, something like that. I think that's kind of what's going to happen. And he's
we've had quite a few, father-sons or teams over the years. What a great way of days with
Yeah, absolutely. And then we'll finish up with, and I'm just curious, Jack, what are the most memorable cars that you've seen people drive in Gumball? I mean, I know it spans across
the very first Gumball, we had a McLaren F. Now probably, let's say, upwards of $30 million car, $40 million, maybe even more. Having things like that are incredible. When people build cars or concept cars for it, the Tumbler, the Batmobile special, I think that's probably been on one of the we did. We've had all the kind of famous cars. Tony Hawk did in the 18 van one year. But in terms of sort of the supercars, hypercars, and even classic cars, I think we had a Ferrari 2, which is a really incredible, rare racing Ferrari. Nothing really beats the McLaren F1.
Yeah, I don't think so. Where do you go from there?
That's how well. And after that, several other McLaren F1s on the rally is just, regular cars. Less so these days. Once the price of them sort of started to eclipse 10 million, for a car, people have been a little cautious about mileage on them. In recent years, we have a lot of Paganis and Koenigsegg's, and, we're talking sort of these are sort of 3-4 million upwards. So, I love these incredible cars are being built and not just going into collections used. There's a handful of people out there that are willing to drive them and have a bit of them and use them for what they were intended.
Yeah. I will say, I know firsthand that car on Gumball, I mean, you're like banging the car up pretty good. I mean, you're going to drive potholes and there's some things you're going to avoid. I mean, you can be careful about it, but I think in the end, you just got to expect to be some wear and tear from Gumball. So you're right. It's quite the commitment. Well, man, this has been an amazing conversation. It's so good to reconnect with you. I know it's been some years, and I'm so glad to hear the family's doing well and business is doing well. I'm following along and always cheering you on. So
thank you.
Thanks a lot for today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.
So you've been listening to the Built on Purpose podcast brought to you by Scouts. You can watch all of our future and past podcasts at yscouts.com. Thanks again, and we'll hopefully catch up with you soon.
Absolutely.
All right.